Okay, so my presentation is on the mental health effects of nature. And I thought this was a really pertinent topic, especially right now, since we're living in a pretty chaotic and unprecedented times. And I think the complex chaos that we are living in our daily lives are oops, sorry. Are kind of disillusioning us. And I think going back to our basics is one of the great ways for us to reconnect with ourselves and our world. So I have no disclosures other than the fact that I guess I'm pretty biased because I love being in nature. So a little bit background. So there's this concept of organism environmental fit benefit on well-being. And this concept is that nature or natural environments is where human beings have evolved and spent the majority of their biological and cultural history. And with the rise of urbanization over hundreds, thousands of years, and mental illness has also increased, especially recently with anxiety, depression, and suicide. So it's estimated that by 2050, 70% of people will be living in urban settings. And when this study was done, it was early 2010s, and it was estimated over 50%. So we're rising quickly in the urban sector. Average American spends about 10 hours of screen time per day and 93% of their time indoors. There's this environmental generational amnesia and extinction of experience, and this may due to our current generation's reduced experience of the wilderness, as well as this increased environmental pollution that we're creating, preventing us from experiencing nature. So nature is an evidence-based health promotion intervention, and I want to share with you some of the stronger evidence on these effects. So there's a lot of research on this topic that spans from small sample size studies to longitudinal studies, and so I just wanted to present some of the stronger studies in the form of randomized controlled trials. And I just wanted to also remind everyone that this treatment is free and virtually no side effects, maybe some bug bites or strained muscles from hiking or sunburns, but that's all avoidable. And I also wanted to remind us all that we live in Tucson, Arizona, and we're lucky enough that this is so readily available to us. So before I go on to the studies, I just want to give you an overview of some of the things that I want to share with you today. So Shinrin-yoku is Japanese for forest bathing. The Japanese were actually some of the earliest researchers on the benefits of health or nature on mental health. And also there's been studies on the greenification of urban areas in the United States and how that's affected our mental health. There's studies also showing brain activation or underactivation areas that have to do with depression, anxiety, and they show that through functional imaging. In addition, there's biomarkers of stress such as cortisol, heart rate variability that's also been studied. And I wanted to also find some studies to show you how to differentiate nature from physical activity versus just exposure to nature imagery instead of actual experiencing nature. And then I wanted to just give you an overview of all the benefits of or mental health benefits of nature that I don't have time to tell all of you or everything about today. So before we go on to the studies, I wanted to share with you a survey called The People's Choice done by these two American artists during the conceptualism era. So they did a survey in the 1990s to attempt to find the most desirable painting in 14 countries. And they looked at various different parameters, such as what color do people like, what kind of brush strokes, what kind of canvases. Do you like outdoor, indoor scenes? What do you want in your landscape? And do you like your people to be nude or fully clothed? So these were the results. So the top left is the US, top right is France, bottom right is China, bottom left is Turkey. So as you can see, these paintings have a lot in common. Blue skies and a body of water, maybe some plants and a sheltering rock, maybe some animals and people enjoying the scene. So it seems like what gives us life is also what we find aesthetically pleasing. And this kind of supports the African savanna hypothesis, which is how people who comprehended and appreciate the value of their native landscapes survived and multiplied and evolved versus those that didn't. So it seems like that we as human beings have this intrinsic universal love for nature's beauty. So this is the first study that I wanted to share with you, done in Japan, one of the earlier studies on forest bathing. So Japan has the third highest suicide rate at the time of this article, and 67% of their country was forest landscape. And this gave them a unique setting to study forest bathing. And they looked at the effects on stress, anxiety, and even immunity. So this was one of the earlier studies that had two different groups submerged in forest area or an urban area as control, and they just studied them. The intervention was having them walk 15 minutes in the morning and then 15 minutes at night looking at their setting. And this showed lower tension, anxiety, depression, and higher vigor in the forest environment. And these higher scores for emotional and cognitive restorative outcomes, subjective vitality, were seen after the walk and after the viewing sessions, which means even these short experiences of 15 minutes confer positive psychological benefits. And the key to forest bathing, according to this study and many others by this group, is that you need to use all 5 of your senses to experience nature, not just looking at it, but also touching, smelling the pines, or maybe even drinking the water. This is a study done in Philadelphia, also randomized controlled study, and it looked at the it looked at a lot of different adults in many different city lots in Philadelphia who underwent one of 3 treatments. So greenification of the urban area, or just trash removal, and the third was the control, no intervention. So this is a pretty powerful study, a big N number. It showed significantly better mental health outcomes observed for the individuals in close proximity to the greenification condition. And the way they measured that was 43% reported less depressed, 50.9% less worthless versus the control. This is another RCT done via functional imaging study with an N of 38, and they put these people through a 90-minute walk through a natural environment or an urban street. And what they found was that rumination as a maladaptive pattern of self-referential thought, which they said was associated with increased risk of depression, was actually reported to be lower. In addition, it showed decreased neural activity. And they said that this rumination, part of the origination was from this part of the brain called the subgenual prefrontal cortex. And this was associated with lower self-focused behavioral withdrawal, which was linked to less rumination, and thus less rumination in both depressed and healthy individuals. This is a new study that was done just this year on 90 healthy university students. And there are multiple interesting factors about the study. The first one was that they tested these healthy individuals in stress-free time and stressful time, meaning during exams and not during exams. And they randomized it to 3 arms, putting them in nature, putting them in a gym, or just in front of a TV screen with nature. And they had them walk through these 3 different environments and measured their cortisol, heart rate variation, and also got their subjective psychological affect to try to really differentiate what was the difference between nature versus exercise versus just being exposed to the image of nature. And as expected, actually walking in nature had more restorative effects over just being exposed to the scenes or just physical exercise. And even more interestingly, these effects were greater when people were more stressed, meaning during their exam times, which I think is a great way to extrapolate this 2020 study to our 2020 times. As we live under the pandemic, I think these are perfect conditions to try nature out and see how it can benefit you and your patients. And so this is a nice review study, I thought, that kind of summarized a lot of different effects of nature. So the previous 3 studies, I focused on more of how to be closer and more immersed in nature to decrease stress levels and increase resiliency and vigor and sense of well-being. In addition, this review talked about increased social interactions, cohesion, engagement with not only your daily tasks, but engagement in life, finding of meaning and purpose, managing your tasks, cognitive function, memory, attention, impulse inhibition, academic performance, imagination, and creativity. And through my research, I also found there were certain educational concepts that were extrapolated to young children, in the sense that immersing them in nature can help them focus and help them increase their imagination, creativity, which later on promoted increased success, academic performance later on in life. And in addition, nature had reduced risk factors and burden of mental illness, such as improved sleep and decreased anxiety, ADHD, and depression. And another interesting thing about this study was it talked about how as urbanization increases, we can try to conserve nature in an ecosystem manner, in that we integrate parts of nature into our future city planning, and we can actually still confer a lot of the benefits still while living in modern societies. And so these are some of the reasons why I love nature. And so my dad is the one that got me to be exposed to nature and through hiking. And I think he taught me about nature at the perfect time in my life when I felt really lost and alone. And I think it's brought a sense of meaning into my life. It's not just a hobby for me. And I think I look the happiest when I'm out there in the outdoors. So I invite you just to think about what would make you love nature as well. And these are my sources.